The following presentation and the next one will deviate a little bit from the main purpose of our site, which is a comparative study of the Bible and the Quran. What we want to do now is just to talk about the relationship between mainstream Christianity and what we call apostolic Christians. As we have seen last time, there are two groups of Christians all around the centuries, and how did they deal with each other? And the next question will be, how did Islam relate to those two groups? As you remember, the Bible and the Quran speaks about two groups of Christians. And the Quran said that a Muslim has to talk in the most courteous way with those who follow the book, and also to ask questions if he is in doubt. So that's why I think it's important to have a very, very brief overview on that situation. Just after the death of Constantine the Great, which was the emperor in 300 something, so it was at the beginning of Christianity, institutional Christianity began to fight against so-called dissidents or heretics. But especially Justinian the Great, 200 years after Constantine, laid the foundation for their mistreatment, stipulating that, and I quote, all Jews, Gentiles and Christians who did not embrace or profess the Catholic faith within 3 months were declared infamous and as such excluded from all employments and their estates confiscated. So Justinians make a law. It's very clear that everybody, Jew, Christian, non-Christians, pagans, anybody in his realm has to become a Catholic, otherwise he will lose his employment and he will lose his properties. So such a declaration shows that Christianity was divided at that time. We may assume that one of the main duties of the bishops and the priests in the villages, in the churches, was to be sure that the members of the church were not deviating from what the church was teaching, not asking too many questions, not reading the Bible or listening to other people. The parishioners had to be conformed to the official dogmas. So these apostolic Christians, these Christians who lived according to the Bible, were apprehended as a threat against mainstream Christianity. And they were really, really persecuted. Actually, there are two things we need to mention here. The first one is the invention of the Inquisition. In the 1530 something, the Society of Jesus, the so-called Jesuits, were created. It was a society who had a very clear goal. The specific purpose of the Jesuit was to combat all heretics, anyone who was not Catholic. They should be combated wherever we could meet them and in every possible way. By the way, those who aspired to be accepted into the Jesuit order, at that time and today, they were required to exterminate the heretics from the faith of the whole earth. It means that the purpose of the Jesuit order is to exterminate everyone who is not living or believing according to what the church says. To extirpate these people, it means to kill them in every possible way. The Pope, Innocent IV, issued a text with a very, very clear name, unequivocal, ad extirpanda. So we have to extirpate, eradicate all those who don't believe as we do. And in this text, the Pope recommends torture as a way to convert people back to main Christianity. This is where we need to mention somebody else called Bernard Guy, a French citizen, who wrote a book called Liber Sententiarum, the book of the punishments. In these books, this is what he says. I quote a little bit from that book. From the beginning of the process, the judge can proceed according to his arbitrary judgment and mood. So the judge handles as he wishes, according to his arbitrary judgment, not according to facts, and even it said here, according to his mood. That gives you an idea of the level of seriousness of those people. The text continues, the slightest suspicion and the vaguest denunciation gives him the right to start a procedure against anyone. Assigned as residents or imprisoned, the accused must swear to tell everything he knows about the heresy, himself and others, whether alive or dead. He is under obligation to self-incrimination and has no right to be assisted by a defender. In case of refusal to confess, 2 witnesses against him are sufficient to bring a guilty verdict. He is neither allowed to know the name of these witnesses nor to get a chance to be confronted with them. If a heretic stubbornly refuses to retract his errors, the church must hand him over to the authorities. Those have to deliver the impenitent to the secular arm with no alternative but to commit the heretic to the flames or to excommunicate him for having opted in favor of heresy. So this is the Inquisition, this is the Jesuit order. Now, what was the result? Careful and credible historians have estimated that more than 50 millions of human beings have been killed during the Middle Age just because they were supposedly believing in a different way than the main church. We have to add to this thousands of Jews, witches, a lot of people were just accused, burned just for the kind of accusation we just mentioned. It's unbelievable that when we add up all the crimes or the genocide of the 20th century, we don't come up to such a number of 50 million victims. That gives us an idea of what the church has done. Again, we're not criticizing a church, we're just telling that this is what happened in the Middle Age. And by the way, no church has apologized for what happened in that time. And as I said, the Jesuit order still have the same vow when somebody wants to join them. The second infamous footnote of history, which is more than a footnote, it's a tragedy, is what we have called the Crusades. The Crusades were really a bad memory, especially for Muslims. When Muslims speak about crusade, this is something really bad. But we should also notice that the Crusades were not just against Muslims, but they were directed against Christians as well. Just on the way to the holy cities, to Constantinople, to Jerusalem, millions of Christians have been killed by Christians. And some of the first crusades were directly against Christians. I'm thinking especially of the crusade of the Albigenses. The Albigenses were a group in France of people who were trying to live according to the Bible. So they kept the flame of the apostle, the true understanding of the gospel. And they were persecuted, especially in the 13th century. Remember that this expedition, called the Albigensian Crusade, was directed against Christians. The Count of Toulouse was mandated by the French royalty to wage a total war of extermination. Against whom? Against Christians. In 1208, the Pope proclaimed this crusade, insulting the people as heretics, being worse than the Saracens. In other words, for the church at that time, dissident Christians were worse than Muslims, and Muslims did have a bad reputation. And that's what happens in July 1209, the so-called genocide of Béziers. It was a real genocide. Most of the inhabitants of this small city in southern France were Catholics, but some were not. And so when the count, the leader of the crusade, a man called Arnaud Almaric, when he arrived to Béziers, he told the Catholic people to deliver the dissident Christians. Actually, most of them got refuge in the Catholic Church, in the big Catholic Church of Béziers, and many Catholics joined them to protect them. And that's where Arnaud was supposed to choose who was Catholic and who was not Catholic. And he declared, this is the infamous sentence of history, tuez-les tous, Dieu connaîtra les siens. kill them all, God will recognize his own. And then at the end, everybody was killed. The whole city, Catholics and non-Catholic, it was a real genocide. Now, how did the church justify such infamous things, like killing millions of people? Well, the church said that without or outside of the church, there's no salvation. In other words, if you don't belong to the mainstream church, you will go to hell. So what's the difference between being tortured in hell or being killed right away? That was the justification for the Crusades, for the Inquisition, and all these millions of murders all around Europe. Yeah, that's a sad period of history, but it brings us to the next topic, which is how did Islam react to that? Is there any reaction to that? Did Islam apply the principle of the differentiation of the Quran between Christians who are apostates and those who are faithful to the biblical text? That's what we are going to see in the next program. And thank you for asking questions. Thank you for your comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it to be informed of the next venues. Thank you very much.